called Zuzalu, the boundless beyond, to talk about the crypto enable new governance of the digital nomad tribe initiated by Vitalik. We're going to set the stage. And on the panel, I will be moderating it because I'm also one of the Zuzalu members. And we have Vitalik Buterin on the panel, Mr. Vitalik, and also Maggie Chen, partnerships of ETHGlobal. And we have Allie. Please come on to the stage, former CEO of Maggie. Yeah. And also Nicole, yes, the core contributor of Zuzalu. And we are also having Laurence zooming in remotely from Burning Man at the moment, if he's able to get his internet. He just texted me, said internet has maybe some little spot problem, so we will just carry it out with our panel. So Zuzalu is a project that's initiated by a few of you here, especially Vitalik. And I would like to perhaps first ask Vitalik to tell us about Zuzalu. What is it? The name doesn't mean anything, but what is Zuzalu actually?
Ding ding ding.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what is Zuzalu? Basically, it's in what we call an experimental pop-up city. So the core idea is to bring together 200 people from a combination of a couple of different spaces. A lot of Ethereum people, a lot of people interested in either longevity or other kind of branches of biotech. Some people from synthetic biology, some COVID researchers, also people just interested in the topics of new forms of governance in general, and some people from the Vienna rationality community, and there's a longer list. And basically bring people together to just stay in one place for 2 months, and basically see what happens after that, right? Well, I think that the core idea here is that there has been a lot of excitement around this idea of creating new cities or creating new societies, and bringing online communities offline and similar kinds of ideas. And a lot of people have written about this from different angles, and the goal is to try to make a version of that tries to really bring the conversation from just very abstract discussion into reality, and try to see what is a concrete implementation of that, and what would that actually look like in the real world, just to help build more knowledge about where it makes sense to go from there. And so we've done hacker houses before. Hacker houses often last many years, but they only have up to 10 to 20 people. We've done conferences before. Conferences have thousands of people, but they only last a week. And so the idea is to try to push a little bit further in both directions, right? And have 200 people actually staying for 2 months. And this is a big enough jump that it's not something that's really been done much before, but at the same time, it's still manageable enough that a group of people can just come together and get to it, right? So that's where the idea behind Zuzalu came from. And in terms of what it was, basically there's a lot of a big part of it was basically just this kind of open, long intellectual salon. Like there's just discussions about all kinds of interesting topics on all of the areas that interested people. A lot of kind of pollination between people who came from different directions, but also a lot of trying to actually put the different ideas into practice, right? So Zuzalu was one big example. On the outside, there were a lot of things that are going to try to intentionally and communicate to have a healthy lifestyle, including like exercise, including food, but also including things like taking personalized measurements and some more advanced things. And we basically trying to see what kinds of things in all these spaces can we do that you can't as people would do on one person, right? So that was the core, and the 2 months like actually came and actually that happened, and people generally had a good time in Montenegro. And now there's actually multiple like spin-offs of the total happening in various places, and we're looking forward to seeing what the whole concept turns into.
Thank you, Vitalik. I was in Zuzalu, invited to go to Zuzalu too. There was April and May, I think starting with end of March in Montenegro. And there were 200 of us, like Vitalik said, co-live, and then we co-work, and we created a lot of different matches together, projects, and softwares and so on. So, and I met a lot of you, and we became friends afterwards. I was just like wondering, how do you actually select who goes to Zuzalu, and how do you actually engage them? Because they are from all over the world. They are experts in AI and new governance and anything. How do you decide that? How do you actually reach out and all that? Because Zuzalu wasn't advertised before.
Yeah, I can speak to how we did invites this time around. Given it was like the first time doing the event, no one had heard of us, and all we had was this little PDF that we made of what Zuzalu was. We sent it out to the people that we wanted to invite, and surprisingly, people came because it honestly looked pretty sketchy from afar. Like you get this random invitation from a person you don't know to go to Montenegro for 2 months, but through like various forms of verification, we decided that okay, this is legitimate. But this time around, we chose like a couple of tracks to focus around. So Ethereum technology, ZK technology, biotech, decentralized science, and decentralized governance. Those are kind of like the main core themes. So we tried to choose like people who are working in those spaces, people from like researchers to scientists to actual founders as well. And we just did like outreach. We would pick one person in the field and we would trust them to do the curation from their work. They'd be like, oh, like I think these 10 people are great. And from those 10, we would select more and more people. So this time around, it was a very manual selection process, but we were just kind of looking for people who were intellectually curious to the relevant topics. Also like low ego, low status that like actually just wanted to come for the event and not for any like ulterior motives. So we kept it very simple this time around. I think it worked out well. Like we ended up with a really good group of people, and they really carried what the event was.
You want to add on to that, Maggie? Okay. Yeah, so I would indeed receive like a random email, and then just decided to book my flight, and it took 24 hours just to get there, and then stay in this like really lovely town, Tiba in Montenegro. And I also noticed that in Zuzalu, a lot of us are actually digital nomads. So we work on computer, we came from all over the place, but then we actually start to really see each other in real life and spend time together for 2 months. So I want to ask all of you, how is it like to really live with 200 people that you did not know before, and they were awesome, and they were all from different fields together and work together in a place for 2 months?
Yeah, I think it was really neat to do that, especially after everyone went virtual during the COVID era. So it was really magical to be able to spend time with 200 people plus for 2 months.
Yeah, so before this, I was also digital nomading for about a year. And this is the first time I was able to stay in a place for a long period of time where I can develop like a structure to my day, like have laundry, have like a consistent workout schedule, and also be able to walk outside and see like new people every single day and talk to interesting people. It was just like such a focal point for all of the sorts of people that I would want to meet day to day. And it was crazy. So it was like very overwhelming in some ways, like you get to do so much every single day. But yeah, very exciting. Like that still feels so surreal now that we've gone back to normal life where you only do like one thing a day, like very different.
Yeah, I think just adding on, I think like a key topic or a key word that comes to mind when we think about Zuzalu is actually community. I think every single aspect of Zuzalu was around like this concept of community. So first thing in the morning when you wake up and you go to breakfast, there's always someone new to meet at breakfast, because that was almost like a focal point for you to meet other people. And the conversations that you actually have are not so much like, hey, this is what I do, this is my title, and this is like what I'm actually focused on in the industry. It's more like, hey, like, what is your MBTI? Or like, hey, what is your favorite fruit? And a lot of these conversations that came out of just like different community organized events or just events that were happening at Zuzalu were actually very natural, very serendipitous. And I think that was sort of like a key highlight of Zuzalu for all of us. It's just the concept that like you don't have to have any intentions going into it, but you get so much out of it just because of the people that were there. And also there's so many things that are being run kind of like in a decentralized format. So people can organize and self-organize events without like kind of surrounding the main events as well. So there's a lot of stuff happening and there's a lot of flexibility in terms of how you want to manage your time.
Yeah, so something that Maggie mentioned briefly is the serendipity. I think when there's a lot of serendipity, when there's a lot of intentional serendipity, a lot of innovation happens.
Yes, I did feel that. So in short, to me, then it sounds like Zuzalu is 200 really smart, curious, intellectually curious people from all over the world coming to a very remote place in a country that most people did not hear about before and live there for 2 months and bring impact to the country and dig out on all the selected topics, EKP, AI, communities, and all that. So, and then the products happens and all these things, amazing things happen. So, I was also curious, how did you guys decide on the topics of Zuzalu? I understand that Zuzalu is a fairly decentralized community. Everybody can like decide on topic, but how did you decide the 4 topics of each week?
Yeah, well, so I think the way that this started was that there were like a couple of these major themes where I think part of it is just like ultimately, we're Ethereum people, and so Ethereum is going to be in the center. And then, I mean, things like bio and like interest in governance, like they just have a pretty high overlap with that space, but are also somewhat different group. But then from there, it started off being a couple of sort of officially designated like weeks or targeted to particular events, but then people just started coming in and they started like expanding and creating parts of their own schedule and then sort of fruition slowly expanding from there.
I see. Sounds amazing because I was there too. I experienced that. And so in April and May, when we were in Montenegro, we really did create a lot of things. I'm also wondering what kind of impact had Zuzalu brought to Montenegro, the benefits and all these things. And maybe Vitalik can share.
I mean, first of all, it's that it brought 200 people to a resort during a time when it would have otherwise been empty. So it contributed to the economy in a way that just that just otherwise would not have existed. And I think for some of the people in the restaurant, like it was a trading opportunity that would have otherwise been less paid and a lot more boring for them. And so there's like that basic added value, but also there were some kind of longer lasting connections I think that were made between the social community and different people in Montenegro. There were some Montenegrins who actively participated in Zuzalu and some like locally focused AI and like other applications that got made. There was some interactions with local university students, interactions with the local governments, and because the local governments have been interested in being crypto friendly already, and so they were this gave them opportunities to meet and get to know people that would actually help them on doing that right. So I think it was valuable in all kinds of ways.
Yeah, I also know that after just 2 months of Zuzalu in Montenegro, the entire country's GDP increased, and the country started to implement a lot of digital projects, between the Synthesis One and CBDC and all that afterwards. So it did bring a lot of impact, positive impact to the country. So since we're in Palau, and I don't know that we had discussed this, if we want to do a Zuzalu in Palau, operationally, what do each of you perceive would thing that you need from Palau and what Palau need to provide to have Zuzalu to be operationally functional here.
I guess from like a base layer of operations, we had 200 people come to our event as residents and over 1,000 people came last time as visitors. So there just needs to be enough space to accommodate everyone, enough food. And one of like the key things we want to do at Zuzalu is build in convenience layers for healthy living. So having like a lot of food options, having healthy food options be available to this many people is kind of a stress infrastructurally. So yes, finding a venue. So when we go like location scouting, we have such a long list of things that we want to hit. It's just like, how many restaurants are there in the vicinity? Is there nature in the area? Which of course Palau is beautiful for. Is it price reasonable? Because we try to keep this more like affordable for people to attend and not have price be a barrier. That might be hard for somewhere like Palau where flights are more expensive and so is possibly accommodation. But those are all things that we can find workarounds for. But yeah, I think that was like the only concerns we have operationally is perhaps there isn't enough like infrastructure to meet the scale of all things that we do. I think outside of that, like it has like very unique culture. We usually come here as relatively remote, which is both like a good thing and a bad thing. Like that way, even when our event gets out, there won't be a ton of people crashing and security won't be as much of an issue. So yeah, I think Palau is like a potentially interesting place we can consider as a potential next Zuzalu location.
I think something that's also very unique about where Zuzalu was this time is that, like Nicole mentioned, it was sort of in a remote area, but also close enough to like other small towns that residents could go to on the weekends. So I think Palau, I think like if we do Zuzalu in Palau, I think something that's really important to consider is just like the privacy, the security, and also just like a good balance between like allowing people to really just focus on their work, but also a mix of like having other activities that could be done on the weekends. But not overcrowded so much that it becomes sort of like another exact city. I think that was like the point is to not have it become in a big city or have it become something that is like exact replica of like a city. It was more of like our own smaller village that we could really be able to curate the culture of like what the Zuzalu experience looks like. So I think that's something that's really important for sure.
One thing to note is that Zuzalu is it's an experiment, right? So just because like there were certain parameters to the first Zuzalu, it doesn't mean the second or future Zuzalus have to be exactly like that. So when it comes to size, when it comes to the topics, when it comes to a lot of the more detailed things, I think it's more of a collaboration with like the Zuzalu organizers and the local community rather than just like something that has to be repeated over and over again.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Zuzalu is an ongoing evolution of a decentralized efforts. And even though in the first Zuzalu it was a success and a lot of people want to repeat that, but I can see that the Zuzalu can be just go to all kinds of places and in unimaginable style. So to each one of you, made you, actually, Vitalik didn't share last time. What is Zuzalu to you? And what do you see Zuzalu become in the future, in the next step? Using one sentence to describe what is Zuzalu to you.
That's difficult because I think one of the takeaways from the first one is kind of I don't know, in the sense that like the form factor of 200 people on Chen's game there for 2 months and like being an experiment seems to be again really successful. But at least like for me, a big part of it in the beginning was like we basically use that as a stepping stone and to try to get more insight into what actually makes it more sense. And that's like right now the answer still feels unclear, but it feels like it was the start of the experimentation and not the end. So that is the answer for this.
Yeah, I don't know how easy it is to do this in one sentence, but I'll try to keep it short. I think Zuzalu is a really unique like breeding destination of just like all sorts of talent. So I think it doesn't really matter like what you come from, what your previous experience is, and what your starting point is. I think when you come to Zuzalu, you could be Like it could be a restart, it could be like the blankest version of yourself. You can bring in previous experiences if you want to, but I think it's really like a starting point, like Vitalik said, for a lot of different opportunities and a lot of things that you want to do. And it's like a place where you can really explore different things, and be kind of like strategically positioned in a place to actually do those things, or even think about things that you maybe never thought about before.
I think Zuzalu is very different to everyone. What Zuzalu is to me was a very unique social structure where I could facilitate this lifelong learning. Like I could explore and discover new things all the time and consistently talk to new people about things I've never thought of before. And it's also an amazing place to develop very strong bonds and personal relationships. This is the best place I've had outside of school to just make new friends. I think it's very unique and yeah, it's hard to describe, but I think it'll constantly change.
Yeah, for me, I think they already covered everything I wanted to say, but in addition, I wanted to say that it felt ephemeral yet permanent, right? A lot of the, like we knew that at the end of 2 months, most people were going to leave and go across the world everywhere. But at the same time, a lot of the bonds felt very permanent, like a lot of the people I met there, a lot of the connections, they felt very permanent, and a lot of the lessons learned as well were, at the moment, they felt like temporary, but then I think we learned a lot of lessons that will help those lessons live on for future Zuzalu's.
Thank you. To me, Zuzalu is an infinite opportunity, a tribe that I can meet people that I can learn from and bond with, and a place where I can say anything creative and nobody will tell me, oh, don't do that. People instead will say, let's try it, sounds good. And I love the decentralization of that too. So
I wanted to add one more thing. I think it was a very awesome experiment where digital governance and digital communities interact with physical communities and how to collaborate between those two.
that's a very, very good point, because Zuzalu was a collection of digital nomad in a physical space together. So before we answer some questions from the audience, I have last one question to ask everyone. What's your MBTI? I'm ENFP.
INTJ.
Yes, I'm ESFP, very E, but for the other three, I'm very much in the middle.
I'm INFJ.
And INC and then the JPs floating back and forth.
Well, thank you. So now we would like to ask some questions from the audience. I apologize that I may not see you when you raise your hand, but other people can.
We have a question back here.
Hello, I'm a student at Missouri High School, and my question is, what was the age range of the people there?
I think it was like a pretty big mix. Like we had a speaker that was 17 years old, so she was still in high school, and we had up to like maybe 70, 80. I'm not even sure. There's like a huge age range. I would say the average age is late 20s, but we had a really big group of young people there too.
So if Zuzalu is to come to Palau, what would you Palauians like to see that we do or interact with? Or would you like to learn or see happening from Zuzalu?
We have a question from Senator. Wondering if Zuzalu is as a vow.
Well, the thing with being a DAO is that like you have to actually commit like the governance and like what is the scope of the thing and what is the scope of the thing, and like it requires a certain like level of a certain level of formalization, which I think is like eventually important for something like this, but it's importance that like The thing that's much worse than not having a DAO is being stuck in a DAO that's seated with the wrong structure, right? Like, like you don't want to be. The one thing I've said from day one is that like we're not launching a DAO, right? Like that, if Zuzalu had been, like 43% of like Paradigm and they 16, I think it would have been, a very different vibe, right? But, yeah, so I'm personally, I'm just like waiting to see, like what garbage, like ideas people propose. I actually think there have been some proposals recently that haven't worked out yet. But there's like this, at the end of the day, we just use our own technology stuff. I'm looking forward to the galaxy.
But I also think that it was kind of an experiment to see if there were additional governance things beyond what people have been doing, existing with DAOs, right? So expanding on what DAOs can do potentially, and just like thinking outside of the box.
Thank you all. Thank you all for coming. Thank you all for coming. Speaking this morning, on the concept of Zuzalu, I'm very ignorant to it, but could it potentially become something like, how we have digital nomads where people go from space to space? Could this become a digital city? Nomadic city, a digital nomadic city that moves from place to place, or do you envision it staying where your experimental location was? We talk about Palau now as perhaps being a location for Zuzalu per se, or would it be something in your mind where other places could construct something similar and then they establish a sister city partnership in a sense? Like, for example, instead of being like Upolu for Palau, for instance, Upolu for CNI, and then they all have some type of similarities but differences, and then they all coordinate together. What structure did you have in mind at this early stage with Zuzalu? And it's such a unique and interesting comment. I just like congratulate you guys on the brainchild behind this concept.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, actually, yeah, because a lot of like historical and nomadic societies and tribes did move together as groups, right? Like you'd have groups of, roughly like Denmark number size, like 100 or 200 people that move around between different places together. And there's a lot to that model, right? Like, you have novelty on your physical location, but you still, keep your relationships across your life. I think for this, it's, as we people like to say, it's still early days, and lots of things going forward are possible. So, things like this may well end up happening. And I mean, the other thing is that, you don't need permission from any of us to start, or so, if you wants to use this, start this on your own, you're welcome to do that too. Awesome.
Yeah, I definitely think we don't want to own the trademark, and we've been very encouraging, of course, like we want people to spin out. So, in the future, it could look like that there's 10 different ongoing Zuzalus at the same time under different names. You find the one that fits you. They can be slightly different in variation. Like we can explore together, and if something doesn't work, we roll it back in one. If something works well in another, we adopt that everywhere. So yeah, this is all up for grabs. And in the future, like who knows? Maybe we'll build a permanent city. Maybe someone else will. So yeah, I think it's read on for more information. No spoilers now.
I think there's actually been quite a number of people who were at Zuzalu that have already been starting to fund like the future Zuzalus, or like there has been other digital nomad cities, for example, like Prospera in Honduras, which was like one of them, and they're actually building like a real like city that is actually kind of like has their own jurisdiction. So we've definitely seen a lot of people starting to already plan for like what post Zuzalu looks like according to their own terms, and I think it's definitely something that we want to encourage because. It really depends on like what you're looking for, and you can really just define the Zuzalu experience according to what you want it to look like.
Thank you. Have you heard of Satoshi Island? It was incorporated as a DAO in the Marshall Islands, and it's actually physically located in the Solomon Islands. And I think they're doing the same thing as far as building the this island that they bought for digital nomads to go and do all these things that they're doing. So in the Marshalls, we lead the world in registering DAOs, and we're open for non-profit DAOs and also for-profit DAOs. And we've actually introduced legislation and we've recognized, I think, close to 100 DAOs right now with registered in the Marshalls, and one of them is actually Satoshi Island. Thank you.
Well, yeah. I haven't heard of Satoshi before, but that's very cool.
The Marshall Islands too.
Anything possible.
All right, thank you. Is that all? No, I guess next now we will having Palau, we will also probably move to Marshalls. So thank you, everyone, and I hope to continue this conversation. And at this trip, we will then explore possibilities and feasibilities of enabling this digital nomad tribe here and make Palau as one of the homes for many of us. Also, another thing, not only there are Zuzalu members on stage, there are also a lot of Zuzalu members in the invited speakers down there. So you can just talk to a lot of the Web3 people here. Actually, many of them are Zuzalu contributors. Okay, so